All right, here we go. Welcome to another episode of the Non-Victim Nation podcast. And today I am joined by Mr. Mark Spicer, who is the author of 6 different books, uh, mostly dealing with the ideas of being a sniper.
Mhm.
And then the most recent one is called Outdance the Devil,
Yeah.
which I did get the book and I started to read it. Unfortunately, I didn't get to finish it. It was very deep, emotional stuff that you got going on there.
Mhm.
But before we get too far into that, I'd really like to kind of start like at the beginning of like, when you joined the military, did you know that you wanted to be a sniper? Was that something that just kind of came along afterwards,
No, not
or?
at all. I kind of followed my father into the army eventually, but
Mhm.
I left school at 16. Um, I became a vehicle technician with our equivalent of the US Mail, but just wasn't happy. So in the meantime, I joined the UK equivalent of the National Guard.
Okay.
Um, and I started off in the infantry, and then I did selection and moved on to special operations. And I just found I was enjoying it way more than I did being a mechanic. So I
Mm,
waited until I finished my apprenticeship. And then I joined the regular army at 20.
okay.
So I went straight into the infantry. And my first deployment was to Berlin when the wall was still up and like 250 miles behind enemy lines, so to speak.
Right.
Is a good lesson. It's an eye opener to what the Cold War was really about.
Right. Um, I think that there's probably a lot of people that listen to the podcast that are maybe a little bit younger and don't have all of the history about the Cold War and
Hmm.
the sort of things that were going on there. Um, so I don't want to get too far into that, but like I know that like as a kid, there were two things that were always like super appealing to me. Like one was being special forces, and the other was being a sniper. And I think that most people who have ever seen snipers, like in any kind of movies or literature, that sort of thing, have like kind of a dream about wanting to take on that. Um, but from your perspective, it's not a glamorous thing. It's a deep. I don't know how to
Extremely
explain. Yeah,
uncomfortable thing.
yeah,
You watch war movies, etc. It just seems extremely glamorous. I was either cold and wet or hot and wet. Any time you're doing it, it's uncomfortable.
right.
The world is a very different place from belt buckle level.
Mhm.
So the majority of the time you can't see further than a few meters around you. You decided which way you're going. You normally pick something you can see from land on the ground as a guide, keep you going in the right direction. And you just really learn to rely on your ears and your sense of smell more than you do your eyes.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's not comfortable. It makes me laugh when people go on about they want to do this and they want to do that. Like,
Right.
try crawling for a mile and tell me you want to do it again. Um, it's hard work. And you see
Right.
guys in like basic training in PT where they're made to sort of low crawl just the length of a football pitch
Mhm.
and they're dying. You go, well, do that for a couple of miles.
Right.
Tell me you still want to do this.
Yeah.
But the shooting is the easy part. It's the British Army and I think the US Army are the same now, where the shooting part used to be kind of towards the end of the course.
Mhm.
They moved it to the beginning of the course when they realised that was the easy bit. The rifles are great, scopes are great.
Mhm.
As long as you know listen or you've got a natural aptitude to shooting, you're going to pass the shooting phase.
Mhm.
It's the fieldcraft phase that everybody fails.
Right.
So that's not, and that's when it gets difficult. Shooting on a range is, even if it's raining, which it normally is in England, it's not that uncomfortable.
Right.
But crawling around in the cold and wet, crawling through and along rivers, it's not pleasant.
Yeah.
But it is fun. I mean, I hate that. So it sounds like a trivial word to use,
Mhm.
but it is. For me, sniping was the last thing on the modern battlefield that is one against one.
Right.
It's one man against one man.
Mhm.
And if you come out, you were the better man. If you don't, you weren't.
You're right.
And it's a challenge.
Mhm.
And with today's technology, it's just getting harder and harder.
Right.
Um, but I think people forget in the last sort of couple of decades, the UK and the US, because we always deploy together wherever we go, um, we've had that technological advantage.
Mhm.
You're not going to get that against Chinese or whoever comes next.
Right.
So I think you're going to find the man with the bolt action rifle is king again because he can still do his job.
Okay.
It's going to be fun. As drones are dangerous now, and as funny as it is to watch the Ukrainians dropping mortar bombs on tanks, etc. They are clearly a real threat.
Hmm.
If you look at the Houthi attacks now on shipping,
Yeah.
and recently the Iranian attack against Israel,
Hmm.
drones are clearly a problem.
Right.
And it's no different for snipers, because a lot of these small drones now will have thermal imaging on them, etc.
Hmm.
So if they even think you're there, they'll just fly a drone out now instead of presenting a target. But technology goes around in a circle.
Right.
Drones won't be a problem much longer. There's already people working out how to stop them.
Yeah, I have to imagine that. I mean, if you think back to like World War I, World War II, when they were using iron sights for sniping,
Hmm.
some of the things that you read some of the accounts of what they accomplished with just that technology versus what we have now. So I get where you're saying that it's significantly easier now that they've probably taken a lot of the calculation parts out. So, but then, like you said, there's the whole drone thing where it's no longer like one-on-one again anymore. So we've got to figure out new ways to deal with that. But our technology leaps so fast that eventually even that will be a secondary thing. There'll be something else we have to worry
They'll
about.
find something else,
Yeah.
and it's a great way of keeping corporate going, keeping business going. Is just keep
Yeah.
you just keep reinventing something different.
Hmm.
I mean, the guys in the First World War, it was literally down to shooting skills,
Hmm.
camouflage skills, and Kentucky windage. You couldn't read the wind. It really didn't matter how good a shot you were.
Right.
And I think any sniper commander today that's worth his salt, it still has no technology days with his snipers.
Hmm.
And I used to do all the time. I'd say to my guys, okay, no rangefinders, no nothing. It's just you and your rifle.
Hmm.
You've got to be able to do the job
Hmm.
without all the technology. It's great having rangefinders. It's great having laser designators and all that other stuff that goes with it. Kestrel for reading the wind, etc. You still got to be able to do without it.
Right.
And anyone who's training not to do that is asking for a good kick in it on the battlefield.
Hmm.
And I think the most shocking decision to me recently was the U.S. Marine Corps stopping their sniper program. Um, so the only snipers now are within the raiders, within the MARSOC region. Doesn't make any sense to me. Um, but some bean counter somewhere has decided
Yeah, I was gonna
it's
say,
a way to
is there
save
some
money.
logic kind of behind that idea, or just they
To
decided
be
it
honest,
wasn't
in
worth it?
history, it's happened multiple times. The in the UK at the end of World War II, the army stopped training snipers. Didn't
Hmm.
need them anymore. Luckily for us, the Royal Marines kept it up.
Hmm.
When the army realised, okay, we made a mistake, the Royal Marines basically brought the army back up to speed.
Right.
So it's not uncommon,
Hmm.
and you see a lot of people. They'll look at today's technology and they'll just go, "Damage can one man with a rifle do?"
Hmm.
Well, that was part of the reason certain parts of my second book on sniping were to highlight the damage one man could do with a rifle. My hometown is Portsmouth in England, so it's a big naval town. It's the same as Norfolk over here.
Hmm.
So one of the last things I did before I left the army, so my brother was working in the dockyard, and I got him to speak to the crew of one of the destroyers was in to get me a day where I could come down and look at it
Hmm.
because I wanted to see the damage a sniper could do to a warship. Well, they laughed at me as soon as I got there. And I got all the sarcasm about, I hope you're a good swimmer because we're out in the middle of the Atlantic and,
Uh-huh.
you better be a good shot. Until you say it's a very small harbour mouth and you've got to go out of there.
Hmm.
Um, there's loads of apartment complexes around here. You can never monitor all of them.
Hmm.
You put one terrorist up there with a 50 cal, I won't sink a warship. But if I put 10 holes below the waterline,
Hmm.
the ship's got to go out, turn around and come back in to find them and plug them. Well, every deployment a warship does is planned years ahead, at least a year or 2 years ahead. And they usually join in a combined fleet.
Hmm.
So let's just say I damage an anti aircraft destroyer. I've got to find another one now to put it in that fleet because I've just stopped this one going.
Hmm.
So once they realise, okay, maybe I did have a point, they obviously showed me around uh, the warship. And there are two two general designs to a warship. One is there is like a central corridor that goes down the ship, and everything is off those corridors on the outside.
Hmm.
The other one is the corridor goes around the outside of the ship, and everything's on the inside. But you have so many magazines and books you can freely buy now that will show you the inside of,
Right.
of ships and everything
Hmm.
else. Even nuclear submarines, etc. They just put the side of the warship where the nuclear stuff is, so they don't show you it. But what they're telling me is that's exactly where the nuclear stuff is.
Right.
So you've only got to interpret it, and that's
Mhm.
one of the things I enjoyed about sniping is outthink you, I'm going to outlive you.
Mhm.
Um, and it's a challenge. It's a constant challenge to get inside somebody else's head. Um, on another warship I looked at, you, warships are very well balanced. They've got to take the fuel from certain places, or the ship loses its stability. So I was surprised to find the aircraft hangar
Mhm.
was over one side. Well, you think the aircraft would be central.
Mhm.
So I asked, and they said, no, all the fuel, aviation fuel, and the weapons are kept on that side, which keeps it balanced, and the aircraft's on this side. Is that armored? Just same plate steel as the rest of the ship.
Mhm.
So you go, so 50 cal armor piercing, flash incendiary round would go through that. And then
Mhm.
you see the light bulb go on, and they're like, you'd blow the back end of the ship off. Hmm, going out of the harbour when you're within
Yeah.
range. So it is all about thinking. It's about
Mhm.
what damage can one man do with a rifle. One man with a rifle could do a lot of damage
Right.
as long as he's got a brain,
Mhm.
as long as he understands the tactical implications of what he's going to do.
Mhm.
That's why all snipers are trained to select the best target on a battlefield,
Mhm.
which isn't necessarily the officer. If you've been watching him for a couple of days and the officer's clearly an idiot, leave him alive. Find the NCO who's
Right.
clearly run it, drop him.
Mhm.
Or you find the guy that everyone looks up to.
Mhm.
No, he might be a private soldier. He could be a PFC, but he's a good soldier and everyone looks up to him. I drop him, their morale's out the window because, as far as they're concerned, if he can be shot, what chance do we have?
Mhm.
So it is about getting inside your enemy's head,
Mhm.
um, and doing as much damage as you possibly can. A sniper's ability to shoot, to me, has always been outvoted by his ability to think.
Mhm.
The other example I always give is if you've seen these guys and they're covered in snow, they've been that way for a couple of days, they haven't had a hot meal. And then you see someone coming with two containers. Okay, I'm going to probably guess that's a hot meal. But the soldiers will confirm it for me because they'll know it's a hot meal when they see it. And if I see them starting to get their knives and forks out and their mugs out and everything else, I just wait till he gets close enough and then I shoot him. Then they've got a choice. Do they leave that hot food there, or does one of them go for it? One of them goes for it, shoot him as well. And
Right.
when you work out nobody else is going to go for it, just put a couple of holes in those containers and let them, one, watch it drain away, and two, smell it drain away.
Yeah.
I wouldn't advise getting caught at that stage.
I was going to say that would be a bad day.
Yeah, they're not going to make you a cup of tea at that stage. But it is about mentally destroying your enemy.
Mhm.
And sniper's job, as well as like real time reporting, so we'll get in and we'll give real time intelligence on the enemy. Our job is to assess how we can best hinder the enemy, reduce his ability to fight before our troops arrive,
Mhm.
by just keep picking away at him.
Right.
That's the way you do it. That's why I used to ask all the foreign students that came through the British Army Sniper School when I was an instructor there, what's your country's policy on sniper prisoners of war?
Mhm.
They all pretty much said the same thing. We don't take snipers prisoner. So it's not going to be a good day if you get caught.
Right.
You'll find all over battlefields in Normandy, etc. And there was one quite recently where a French couple made a modification to their house. They pulled a wall down, and in the air gap between the wall was a complete German sniper's equipment. His rifle, everything was just all dropped in there. So you have to surmise he knew he was going to get caught fairly quick, and he knew if he was caught as a sniper, he probably wasn't going to get a good day.
Mhm.
So he ditched it all. Just said he was just infantry, and I would suggest he probably survived.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's not a subject to get taken prisoner on.
Right. So I do like the idea that you point out that A, it's not glamorous, but B, that there's so much more to it than just the actual,
Yeah, which
shooting
is,
a
to be
person.
honest, why I wrote the books.
Yeah.
The guy that wrote the intro to my first book, Harry Furness, he was a very successful World War II sniper,
Mhm.
and I got to know him, and we spent a lot of time together talking. And it was funny because all the problems he had as a sniper, I was still having.
Mhm.
It just hadn't changed. But I was kind of whining to him about all the books on sniping being written by people who weren't snipers,
Right.
and he just said, "Write a book or shut up." So I was like, okay. And whilst the sort of armchair critics were like, "Oh, there's so much missing from this book,"
Hmm.
not realizing that's on purpose, mate. You know,
Yeah.
if you need to know that part, you're already a sniper, and they'll train you to do it. You don't need to know that part. But I wanted to show people, one, it's not glamorous.
Hmm.
Two, it's a course that more people fail than any other course in the military,
Hmm.
because it really isn't for everybody. It
Hmm.
does take a kind of different type of person.
Hmm.
I hate to use the word special, but just different. You
Right.
know, you've got to be happy with being miserable most of the time,
Hmm.
and you've got to have that never quit attitude.
Yeah.
Because your options are surrender, which means they're probably going to beat you up and kill you anyway, or get killed. So you
Hmm.
just keep going,
Right.
and it's enjoyable. I mean,
Hmm.
there is a certain amount of satisfaction, even in training, when I'm looking directly at the instructor who's looking directly at me with a powerful optic,
Hmm.
and I know he can't see me, but I've got a crosshair right in the middle of his head. It's extremely satisfying to know that you can do that.
Hmm.
Um, and it's evolving. When I first did my course, at the end of a stalk, once you fired the shot and you've not been seen, everything else, you just got up and walked away. That was it, done.
Hmm.
And then we changed it to say, well, that's not really realistic because, okay, you've killed that person, but all, the rest of the unit now know you're there and they're looking for you.
Hmm.
You can't just get up and walk away.
Right.
You know, you've got to manage to move unseen again and get out of that area. So they changed it so that you had to stalk back out,
Hmm.
usually only about 300-400 yards.
Right.
But now everybody's looking for you.
Hmm.
So, and if they caught you at that stage, you failed because in reality they opened fire with a machine gun or throwing mortars at you,
Hmm.
so you failed. But it was more realistic.
Hmm. I have to imagine that there's a tremendous amount of patience that you'd have to have just to stay in one location,
Yes,
you know.
and one of if whatever book you read, it
Hmm.
says one of the qualities of a sniper is patience.
Hmm.
I disagree.
Okay.
I have zero patience. Drive with me for a half an hour, and you'll find out I don't have any patience.
Right.
I think it needs to be changed to self-discipline
Okay.
because I don't have patience, but
Hmm.
I do have self-discipline when I need to.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I don't think patience is the right word.
I gotcha.
It fits, but you know, a sniper can be amazingly impatient in other situations.
Hmm.
So it's not something where you just see the guy laid back all the time.
Hmm.
It's when he has to. Um, there's also an element of rogue, rebel in snipers.
Yeah.
Um, you some guys get into it because they just can't fit into a normal platoon because they either they think their NCO is an idiot or their boss is an idiot,
Hmm.
um, and they just want to be left alone because they can do it better.
Hmm.
And a lot of snipers are extremely good soldiers anyway, and they like the independence of making the decision themselves.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's a rogue element to snipers. I think really to do that job, you've got to be a little bit of a rebel,
Hmm.
and you've got to be a little bit cocky, I guess.
Right.
You know, to go out on your own or go out as a pair.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, you're either mental or you've got balls. Um,
Right.
either one really. But yeah, it's a challenge. Every single time you go on a stalk, every time you kind of deploy in some way,
Hmm.
the obvious outcome is death. You know,
Yeah.
way more likely than if you're on a patrol where, you know, there's maybe 8, 12 guys patrolling.
Hmm.
So the chances of you getting hit are cut down.
Right.
As a sniper, it's just you on your own or you and one other guy.
Hmm.
Your chances are like drastically increased. So you rely on your ability to not be seen.
Hmm.
And it changes from terrain to terrain. You know, you on a stalk, if I'm if I'm sort of in majority green and then I've got to get past like a say cornfield or something where there's a lot of yellow there, or even just low flowers that are yellow, I've got to stop and readjust my camouflage because otherwise this green lump going through a yellow field is going to
Right.
be pretty obvious.
Hmm.
So, you know, the general comment you'll hear in the sniper community is camouflage 6 times, shoot once.
Hmm.
And that's on the way in and on the way out. But if you like that sort of thing, it's fun.
Yeah.
You know, it is challenging.
So I have to imagine too that that gives you a different perspective of the overall, I guess, battlefield perspective
Mhm.
versus like the troops that are like in
Absolutely.
contact, because they're kind of monofocused on whatever they're doing. So,
Yeah, and it's people don't realize that snipers are very strategic because we're sent out to get real time information on an enemy, find an enemy if we're not 100% sure where they are. But whereas we've got the ability to reach out and touch from a long way away,
mhm,
to do so may actually compromise the entire mission. Because if the enemy doesn't know you're in the area and they're pretty relaxed, and then I'll shoot one of you, now they know somebody's in the area.
yeah,
So a sniper's got to know when to shoot and when not to shoot.
mhm,
A lot of the time, it's not to shoot because you're there to gather information, keep an eye on them, so that as your troops are coming up, ready to assault
mhm,
the enemy has no idea they're coming.
mhm,
Your troops know exactly what the enemy's doing because you're feeding them information back.
right,
So to actually start dropping people at that stage, you could ruin the entire operation.
mhm,
So snipers are usually very educated guys. They're not stupid by any stretch,
mhm,
and they understand, be able to picture the overall battle situation and what their particular role is in it,
mhm,
and how they can either assist or detract from that mission.
right,
So yeah, snipers are thinkers, and if they're not, they don't last long.
yeah. So, and you had mentioned before we started recording that you had worked with Chris Kyle,
Mhm.
to put together an organization. Can
Mhm.
you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I first met Chris when I was at Macmillan. Um, Chris and some of the other command structure from Team 3 came out to attend the course to see if it was worth coming to me for training. And as they just got back from Iraq, a couple of them were still sort of carrying injuries.
Hmm.
Um, and me and Chris just hit it off. We just got on very well. And I knew he was deploying one more time. Um, and I convinced Macmillan that they really should give him a 338 to take with him.
Hmm.
It's great advert for them as well. Funny thing is in the movie you'll see Chris drop that rifle towards the end of the movie, and the rifle was lost.
Hmm.
I would suggest that rifle wasn't lost; it just wasn't didn't want to give it back.
Right.
So I know that rifle's still around, but it was a great rifle. Macmillan they make a great sniper rifle,
Hmm.
so I can understand that. But when he was due to come out, I left Macmillan for personal reasons, and then we'd already decided we were going to work together. We were going to start our own company, and then Chris found an investor or several investors in Dallas,
Hmm.
and we started a company called Craft, um, where we were basically just carrying on training, yeah, training people in. Um, we also got involved with helping veterans and disabled veterans and everything on those
Hmm.
lines.
Right.
So, yeah, so we worked together and built that company. Um, it was fun. Chris is a good lad.
Yeah.
It's annoying watching people talk ill of him.
Hmm.
The same as it is of anybody that's not around to defend themselves.
Right.
And there were various things that some of the journalists said didn't happen. Well, I sit here and say no. I know. In particular, one thing certainly did
Hmm.
because I was in Dallas at the time. But there were people high up that were involved in that disappearing. So
Right.
I would guess that's the reason it doesn't show up anymore. Chris was a good man.
One of the things that frustrates me about situations like that, where they're talking about somebody, you know, who at some level became famous or recognizable, right? They speak in terms of this person is supposed to represent everything that's good and not do anything bad because that
Hmm.
tarnishes their reputation. It changes who they were as a person. But what nobody ever stops to consider is that we are all human beings. There's not one of us that is absolutely perfect. There's not one of us that doesn't have skeletons in their closet.
Yeah, absolutely not.
So to look at somebody and try to criticize their life or their decisions, and try to make it seem like that's the lens you should view that person through, I think is idiotic and just completely unreasonable.
Oh, completely. And I think people forget. I mean, at the time, we were both suffering quite bad from PTSI, and obviously, in the book,
Mhm.
I don't want it called a disorder. It's not a disorder.
Right.
Um, Chris was from operations. Mine was actually from my wife's suicide. So it was. We both really, what I guess, weren't the two best people to start a company at the time.
Mhm.
And we kind of went off the rails a little bit at times. I mean, if we weren't starting to fight with somebody in a bar, we were starting to fight with each other. Um, and I didn't realize until I wrote the last book about PTSI why that really came about. And then I suddenly realized in the military, and anyone who's a first responder, etc., we're all trained to deal with physical pain.
Mhm.
It's not an issue. We can deal with physical pain. Mental pain was something completely different,
Right.
and couldn't shut it off. And I know Chris couldn't shut it off. So we kind of, I guess, we realised that if we're in physical pain,
Mhm.
it stops the mental pain.
Mhm.
So the reason we got into so many fights with other people and with ourselves, and we'd be in the back of a car and we'd start a fight, was because the physical pain made the mental pain go away for a little while.
Right.
So it was almost kind of like a bizarre, self-medication, getting punched in the mouth, took my mind off of what was going on inside my head.
Right.
Um, so yeah, but we had some fun. I'm not going to lie, say we didn't have fun.
Right.
But yeah, to expect someone to have seen what Chris saw and not have issues,
Mhm.
I think it's a bit of a wild expectation. You
Mhm.
look at some of these guys, and they'll come back, they end up sort of punching their wives, or they end up in a fist fight somewhere. They end up in a standoff with the police because they're
Mhm.
just so angry.
Mhm.
Yeah, we need to do more. I wrote the book, the one about Outdance the Devil, because kind of realized, right or wrong, in my opinion, the reason it doesn't get
Mhm.
any real funding and anything that goes with it is it's kind of listed as a soldier's injury.
Mhm.
You don't have to go to war, see a traumatic event.
Right.
So in the book, I said the book is going to, be about my military career because it's about me. But
Mhm.
that's not where the PTSD came from me. My wife's suicide was what pushed me.
Mhm.
But nurses, doctors, firefighters, you know, prison service,
Mhm.
kids at school getting bullied.
Yeah.
You know, everybody deals with traumatic stress every day.
Right.
But I think all the time they list it as being a military thing and he's been to war, he's got PTSD or whatever. Um, they can shove it to one side.
Mhm.
So I was trying to raise two things in the book. One, it's a human disorder. It's
Mhm.
not, or it's a human injury. It's not a military thing.
Mhm.
And the second one is it's not a disorder. It's an injury. It can be
Right.
fixed. And a doctor explained it to me. It's no different to breaking your finger. It's repairable.
Mhm.
But the longer you take to treat it, the harder it is to treat.
Right.
And we really don't know that much about the brain still. But
Mhm.
we do know enough to realize it's not a disorder. And I know loads of guys who won't come forward that probably need help because they don't want to be labelled disorder.
Right.
And the sad thing is, when you look at current administration,
Mhm.
it'd not too much of a stretch to say that they would use that and take guns away from people. Oh, you're a disorder, you can't have guns.
Right.
So people are never going to come forward. And what happens then is, men and women are suffering bad.
Mhm.
And, it wasn't until I kind of came out the other side and was asked to sit and think about how I did and because I put a
Mhm.
gun in my mouth multiple times, was just hope. For me, it was my dogs.
Mhm.
I had two German Shepherds at the time, and they just seemed to know. They knew when I was at my lowest.
Mhm.
They also worked out pretty quick if there's a gun next to me, that wasn't okay.
Mhm.
And they would literally end up in my lap.
Right.
So I got two 110-pound dogs trying to get on my lap. Um, and that was enough because it felt like he was spiraling down.
Mhm.
And I remember mentally thinking on kind of every turn was kids will be fine, bank sorted, house going to be fine.
Mhm.
And then the dogs would interrupt that.
Mhm.
And that interruption allowed a little bit of hope
Mhm.
to just creep in
Mhm.
to the point that they'd make me think about something else. And I literally would go, "Ah, fuck it, throw the gun across the room."
Mhm.
And to myself, I, I'll give another day.
Right.
And every day I got to another day and then I got to another day. And it doesn't completely go away.
Mhm.
I mean, I had an incident probably just over a year ago where a couple of things went wrong in quick succession in my life. Um, and you kind of look at it and go, fuck it, I'm done. No more. And I'd written the book. At this stage, it was after I'd written the book.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck, I'm done. Well, my mental thinking was everyone in England's asleep. Everyone in the US is probably having lunch or dinner.
Hmm.
Nobody's going to notice. But I didn't want to be that person that nobody really knew why.
Hmm.
And all I put was I put a cryptic message. It's been an honor. That's all I put up on my Facebook page, thinking nobody would notice.
Hmm.
How wrong was I? Well, I now have 7 German Shepherds. Not my fault. So that's a little blonde dog I got. It's her fault. Well, I wouldn't leave my dogs, so I had them sat next to me, and I was going to shoot every single one of them and then shoot me. And the little fucker just sat there and stared at me like that. Couldn't fucking do it. It was almost they were like, "Come on, Dad, this is what you want to do." Couldn't do it. And once again, I went, "Fuck it." Threw my fucking gun across the sofa.
Right.
Well, as I did, the doorbell went. So I opened the door. I had a friend of mine, Matt from Surprise SWAT, stood outside the door,
Hmm.
and he just said to me, "You okay, Mark?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm having a shitty day, mate, but I'm fine. Why are you here?" And he goes, "Because our phone's ringing off the fucking hook." And I'm like, "About?" And he goes, "Your message on Facebook." And it was a very humbling experience because I spoke to Matt, and they said they'd had calls from multiple countries,
Hmm.
and that people were ringing saying, "Look, you need to get his house now." And then 2 cars pulled up. One, a good friend of mine, Rob, who I worked with him at Millen, he just turned up.
Hmm.
My next door neighbour, who was an F-16 pilot, came walking around the corner. And then the car pulled up with 2 guys that I'd never seen before in my life. One was a former Delta guy, one was a former Ranger. People that had known me had called them because they knew they were in town. So you need to get to his house. And those guys just turned up. Um, they then proceeded to drink me out of everything I owned until 4 o'clock in the fucking morning. And degenerated into a F-16 pilot deciding he could out wrestle a Ranger. That didn't end well for him.
Yeah.
But they were there, it's a very humbling experience that the word about looking out for each other has clearly gone out.
Hmm.
And it was a wake up call for me for 2 reasons. One, there are people that care.
Hmm.
There are people that would have been upset if I'd done it. But it also showed me it's never really gone, and it can be triggered. So one of the things I did in the book was I came up with 2 posters that are in the book, and you could download them over. Because somebody said to me, "Could you just give the main bullet points about how you got through it?" So I came up with strong because I knew it had to be a word that everyone knew, and I knew it had to be a powerful word, and I came up with strong and all the points that went down through it.
Hmm.
And then I realized there needs to be a continuation to that because it can come back. So I used stronger, and I just added the E and the R on it, and the necessary part that went with it. As I say, they're both in the book, and it made perfect sense.
Hmm.
So yeah, one of my campaigns now, I guess, is I just want to get the word out there that one, stop calling it disorder, just call it PSI.
Right.
All right, post traumatic. That's it. You can put injury on the end of it if you want, but
Hmm.
don't put disorder on it.
Right.
You're almost corralling people into not coming forward
Right.
because people say even in the military today they'll go, doesn't affect your career.
Hmm.
Yeah, it does. It has to, because if I'm about to send guys to risk their lives and putting them in harm's way,
Hmm.
I've got to choose between 2 commanders. One's had PTSI issues and been treated for it, seems absolutely fine. One hasn't. Who am I likely to choose? Because I'm going to sit there and go, what if he has a relapse? There's 8 other guys now.
Hmm.
So it has to affect your career by definition, to be honest.
Right.
A soldier's world is not an easy one. There are
Hmm.
some harsh decisions to be made. And whilst politicians don't like making them, they'll put soldiers in the positions where they have to make them.
Hmm.
And then they second guess them when they come back.
Right.
You'll go, really? And I've seen police officers go through it, where you go, oh, you shot the wrong person. Go, well, I had a split second to make that decision.
Yeah.
Okay, oh, he only had a knife. Why did you shoot him? Because he was closer than 21 feet away from me.
Right.
And I know he can get to me before I can draw my gun. So, no, I'm not going to do it. Somebody's coming at me with a samurai sword. Yeah, I'm going to shoot him.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to, in every one of these officers you watch, I absolutely applaud that their restraint.
Hmm.
I could be a cop over it. And the first time he didn't put it down, I'm shooting him. Simple as that.
Hmm.
Could play silly games, win silly prizes.
Right.
But you've got all these now do-gooders in this woke community that's going, oh, we should do this and we should do that.
Hmm.
While Chinese kids are learning how to strip down weapons in class.
Right.
Uh, You're not really thinking this through.
Hmm.
And whilst I think every society can improve,
Hmm.
yeah, there is still a nasty side of life, and soldiering is one of them
Hmm.
for a reason. So you can't put people in the military that are not going to, react immediately. They're told to do something,
Hmm.
or you lose.
Right.
And if you lose all this freedom you've got because all the other countries that are against us don't agree.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't get where the world's going right now, but I'm kind of seeing, I'm hoping that we're coming out of that woke phase
Hmm.
because there's more and more people just going, "You're a woman, shut up."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. Everything else, I'm sorry, is a mental disorder,
Hmm.
which we should be helping, not encouraging.
So I look back on history, and particularly like right after World War II, the United States was in the best place it had ever been
Hmm.
in all of our history. And I believe that what happened was we were became a victim of our own success, meaning that people looked at where we were and said, "Okay, we've reached the pinnacle. We're good, and it's always going to be this way for the rest of time." And it's like that isn't how
It's pretty much true
that's
of
not how
every
history
empire.
works. It's not
Hmm.
how human nature works.
No,
Okay, and so everything, all the decisions they started making prior or after that, rather, were all based on this idea that like we're good, so let's try to like fix all the like the minutia, and whatever. It's like it doesn't work that way. You still have to
I
be
never
prepared.
will. I can't understand why this country is allowing and spending so much of taxpayers' money
Hmm.
on illegal immigrants. They're not undocumented Americans to me, they're illegal.
Right.
I'm a very proud member of this country now. I'm an American citizen. Cost me just over 10 grand and 5 years.
Hmm.
But you do it the right way. And the thing I love about this country is you took every reject from every country all over the planet, and in less than 200 years, you became the most powerful nation this planet has ever seen.
Right.
So it should be the blueprint for how the world should evolve. The diversity was already there.
Hmm.
Now people are using diversity to divide
Right.
instead of bring people together, usually for power reasons or money reasons.
Hmm.
But yeah, I agree. You can't fix everything.
Yeah.
There has to be law and order,
Hmm.
or we're back in the Wild West,
Right.
where every single argument can end in death
Hmm.
because there's no law. I can't believe you can allow people to go into a store and rob up to $900 worth of stuff and say it's not a crime.
Yeah.
A packet of chewing gums should be a crime.
Hmm.
You can't let, and you can see what's happening.
Hmm.
Human nature is greedy,
Hmm.
and people will go and do it. And you've got to have strong men and women who will uphold the law. You've got to have strong politicians who will uphold the law.
Hmm.
And if you look at Winston Churchill, womanizing drunk,
Right.
right? Or that one of the funniest men ever, if you read his book. But he was the man for the right time
Hmm.
because he was willing to make decisions the other politicians weren't willing to make.
Hmm.
But as soon as World War II finished, pushed aside
Right.
because he wasn't necessarily the right man for peace.
Hmm.
And right now, this country's in a state. Um, what we've got isn't working. You
Very
know,
true.
it's not working at all.
Yeah.
So it's got to change.
Hmm.
And I would hate to see another revolution in this country.
Me too. I worry that we're moving further that direction.
People are clearly fed up. I mean, we've
Yeah.
spoken about it before. When you see people getting away and they appear to be, they clearly break the law. It's proven they've broken the law,
Hmm.
and they're not, held accountable for that.
Right.
You end up losing trust and belief in our own legal system.
Right.
And that sadly is a slippery slope
Hmm.
because you're already seeing people take the law into their own hands.
Hmm.
We're back to the Wild West.
Right.
Not good.
Yeah. So, kind of going back to the idea of like the PTSI,
Hmm.
the book talks pretty explicitly about how your wife committed suicide,
Hmm.
and you finding her and trying to resuscitate her, and all of the trauma that kind of went along with that. Um, my son Hunter and I were having a conversation about people who have those sort of tendencies of thinking about suicide or being in deep depression and not being willing to reach out. And I don't mean just like people in military or law enforcement,
No,
that sort of
anybody.
thing, right? But just people in general, right? And why sometimes they won't reach out for help. And I started thinking about it and was talking to him. And what I came up with is that, when people feel like they're not right or they're not well, the very first thing they do is they try to medicate,
Hmm.
self-medicate usually, you know. So drugs, alcohol, whatever the thing is that
Oh, I
they
lived in the
turn
bottom of a
to,
bottle for a long time.
right. And so I think that like if that's their first course of action, then they've already changed their mental state. So they're no longer making rational decisions. Now they're making things that are heavily influenced by whatever they're doing, right?
Yes, they are.
And so not only does that create probably some sense of like guilt or shame about what they're doing, you know, that just becomes one more barrier for them
Hmm.
to reach out. So,
And you end up feeling a burden on your friends
mhm,
because, I mean, I remember very clearly, um, real or not, kind of telling people, yeah, I'm having a good day. And that perceived, get over it sort of attitude. When in most cases, they probably weren't doing that. But I'm feeling weak because I've been trained, man up, get on with it all my
mhm,
life. And the first thing you do is you reach out to your army mates or your police mates and everything else, and you do say, I'm having a hard time. And they respond in the only way they've been trained to respond. They'll tell you, oh, you got this, mate, man up, you'll be fine. And for maybe an hour or so, you go, good, he's told me I can do this. And then you sit and think about it. And then you go, he thinks I'm weak. I've just let my mates down. And then you stop calling your mates. And then you end up more and more isolated because you won't do it. And then you become paranoid. And then you start thinking, I'm the problem. I need to go. Everyone's going to be better off without me.
right.
And it is an immediate stop to that mental pain that just won't turn off. It's just like constantly in your head.
Mhm,
And where death seems like a pretty good idea. It's
mhm,
just done. Um, and the reason I wrote the book is I got challenged by my army mates because obviously we're all sick and tired of 22 veterans a day, taking their own lives.
mhm,
And the point I made in the book was 22 a day is terrible, but at least someone's counting.
right.
How many people are counting? Doctors, nurses, police officers, firefighters, all those other people that see trauma on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm,
Most guys in the military won't see combat, especially if you're not like what we call teeth arms, infantry special forces. Um, they'll go through their entire career and not really witness anything. Whereas police, firefighters, doctors, nurses see death and or people being maimed or the worst that mankind does to each other every day.
mhm,
So I wanted that balance to be there and say it is everybody. It's a human condition.
mhm,
It's not a military condition.
right.
And there's no real support. So in the book, and I've got a doctor to assist on part of it, I wanted to not just talk about my experience, but I wanted to give people a blueprint to
Mhm,
get through it,
right.
which is why I did the book the way I did. But as I say, to get back to how it came about, the guys challenged. They said, okay, you've got to do 22 push-ups a day for 22 days, and you've got to video it because nobody trusts anybody.
Right.
And they said, and if you can, give like a traumatic event from your life that you've got past.
Mhm,
By day five, I was getting phone calls from my friends saying, "Dude, you need to write a book." And they're like, "I thought I had a fucked up life," but and I sat and thought about it, and you start to realize how many traumatic events from a very young age
mhm,
that you bury, you just absolutely bury it.
right.
Um, and then you go, "Well, what have I got to say on the subject?" It's probably the most difficult book to write because I had to relive all of them as I was writing it,
Mhm,
and that had a good sort of byproduct because it did make me face them. And for the first time, I pretty much realized I needed, more therapy because I'd been to therapy before trying to save my marriage. That was a waste of time,
mhm,
thankfully. And then you sort of realize that it does work. Because
mhm,
my attitude when Diane died, my attitude was, what do I want to go to see a fucking therapist for? I'm
right.
a retired top major. I fucking deal with it myself.
Mhm.
And then my other attitude was, why would I go and pay somebody a ridiculous amount of money for an hour?
Mhm.
Um, and then the second that hour's up, he doesn't care anymore because he's got another patient. Or
Right.
if I run out of money, I can't come anymore.
Mhm.
So I just thought it was a complete waste of time. I wouldn't do it. And it wasn't until I actually went to therapy that I realized how talented these people are,
Mhm.
and that they pull things out of you that you had buried so far down you didn't even know were there. And it was
Mhm.
worth it. So I wrote the book. I gave the book sort of script to 4 or 5 very good friends.
Mhm.
I just said, just tell me the truth. Just make me sound like an idiot, or is this worth putting out?
Right.
Every one of them said publish it. So I did, and I still get emails and calls, etc., from all over the world.
Mhm.
People saying to me, until you described the spiral thing, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was going mad.
Mhm.
And it's it's comforting, it's comforting to get it. And the downside is, I've had a lot of friends call me in the last couple of years since that book's been out, literally on the edge. I had
Wow.
one that just said to me, "It's an honor being in your career. I'm done." So I immediately called him. And
Mhm.
he was drunk, but he was also super depressed.
Right.
And for 2 hours, I sat talking to him, and then I heard his wife come home from work,
Mhm.
put her on the phone, and he's doing all right at the moment. But super happy these people are reaching out,
Right.
and it's traumatic at times because last thing you want to hear is gunshot and they go quiet.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I've lost friends.
Mhm.
Um, watched a guy commit suicide while I was in the army. Um, so it's different. It's definitely traumatic,
Mhm.
and you need to talk.
Mhm.
More important, you need someone to listen.
Right.
And I think we're getting better at that.
Mhm.
I think now a lot more people accept it's okay not to be okay.
Right.
And a lot more people now realize that instead of just brushing your mate off, go, hey, you'll be fine, mate, man the fuck up. This guy probably needs to talk,
Mhm.
and even if it's just to get it off his chest.
Mhm.
Because I found I'd have this mental outlook
Mhm.
where I thought I was completely right about something. And then when you do end up talking to somebody about it, they give you a completely different perspective on it,
Right.
which makes you go, hmm, I hadn't really seen that.
Right.
And in the book, I tried to describe how it felt for me, that it was just like you were being pulled deeper and deeper into a darkness.
Mhm.
And the darkness was kind of telling you, I'm your friend, I'm the answer, you'll be okay, and nobody can hurt you. What it
Mhm.
was leading you to was death.
Right.
And that's not your friend.
Mhm.
Because I disagree when people say suicide is cowardly. I don't think it is. It
Mhm.
takes balls to pull that trigger, not really knowing what's on the other side. But what it is, selfish.
Mhm.
Because all you do is you take that feeling of uselessness, that feeling of being a failure, and you pass it to somebody else, usually somebody you love, who is now going to go through about why they couldn't save you.
Right.
Because my biggest problem is I couldn't save my wife.
Mhm.
When I found her, she wasn't breathing. Um, Military training kicked in.
Mhm.
And I saw where she was. I knew I couldn't work on her where she was. So I just grabbed her by a shirt and dragged her across the floor to an open area where I could work on her.
Mhm.
And then in my head was drummed into me all my army career: breathing, bleeding, breaks, burns.
Mhm.
She ain't breathing. Pointless stopping the blood flow. Checked. She wasn't breathing. I assumed correctly there was a blockage in her throat.
Mhm.
So I kind of hooked all that out. And the second I hooked it out, she took a massive breath in.
Mhm.
That was such an amazing moment for me. She's like, yes, she's still alive. Well, now I've got to stop the bleeding. I could see the entry wound. It's right there. And for some reason, because I knew she was a very good shot, she was a very competent police officer, I just assumed it'd gone that way.
Mhm.
Because she would have known, break the brainstem, it's done.
Right.
I couldn't find the exit wound.
Mhm.
And that was when I remember feeling the panic start for me. Couldn't find it. Can't get her breathing to let her bleed out. So I realized if I elevated the wound,
Mhm.
I could slow the bleeding down. So
Mhm.
what I did was I sat on the floor and I pulled her up against me, so her back was up against me and her head was on my shoulder.
Right.
And I held a shirt under her chin.
Mhm.
Um, so now I know I'm slowing the breathing down. Well, the other thing was she was clearly still in there somewhere
Mhm.
because she very specifically raised each leg one at a time. She put her foot flat on the floor,
Mhm.
then she put the other one flat on the floor, and then she pushed as hard as she could, trying to stand up.
Mhm.
Well, I had to say to her, "Dan, stop," because all that effort, she was just pumping blood out quicker.
Right.
And then obviously the police turned up. I'd already opened the front door. As a matter of trying to speed things up, because I had to go and get my phone because it wasn't with me. So put a sort of t-shirt on her to try and slow the bleeding down. Ran to get my phone, opened the front door, ran back in. So the first thing was obviously a surprise officer came in, gun draw. Um, can't blame him. Somebody had been shot. He doesn't know where the gun is.
Right.
Um, but I wasn't necessarily complimentary to him because I wasn't in a great frame of mind. So he's like, "Where's the gun?" Well, I'd already thrown it because I knew they were going to be looking for it. So I'd already thrown it across the floor. And he goes, "There's the fucking gun, you wanker. Where's the paramedics?"
Yeah.
Well, he told them to stay at the door, but God bless them, they didn't. They were literally right behind him.
Mhm.
So as soon as they saw the gun was accounted for, they came straight in and took over from me.
Mhm.
The officer kind of talked me out of the door, but obviously I wouldn't leave, so he left the door open. And obviously he's doing his job and asking me questions and calming me down. She kept raising her feet, putting them on the floor, pushing
Mhm.
to the paramedics like, "Don't stop. You got to stop this." Well, I now know the exit wound was right. It was basically went straight up,
Mhm.
and it was concealed by her bangs, so I couldn't see it. But it was that absolute feeling of uselessness that of all the people in the world, couldn't save my wife.
Right.
With all my medical training in the military, couldn't save my wife. And then they brought the lifeline in. They put her on that. I couldn't get on the helicopter; it's too small. I wasn't best pleased about that. And
Mhm.
I threatened to go over one of the police officers. And then I thought they think it was me.
Mhm.
That's why they're not letting me leave. And the sergeant was there by then. He just said to me, I guess he kind of read my mind. And he just said, "Mark, if we thought it was you, you'd be in cuffs by now.
Yeah.
We've got a car for you. You just can't get on the helicopter." And she died before I got there. So I think the hardest thing for me then was I couldn't see her
Mhm.
because there was a gun involved.
Right.
There's an inquiry. So I wasn't allowed anywhere near, and that pretty much pissed me off. And then you face the trauma of got to tell the world.
Right.
And her mum and dad had left that morning to go back to South Carolina.
Mhm.
So I had to call them. I wasn't good. And obviously you have to tell everybody that's involved.
Right.
And for part of it, it was you just like an almost robot. You just get it done.
Mhm.
And it was only and two friends came back to the house. I mean, initially they said, "You're not going back to the house." I was like, "My dogs are there. I'm going back to the house if I have to fucking walk."
Mhm.
So they came back and there was just this awkward silence. So in the end, I said to them, "Look, you both got work in the morning. I'll be fine." And I was fine to a point. Um, the police officer that was there when I left, I said to him, "Look, just the dogs are stressed. Just look." And God bless him, he'd fed the dogs before he left,
Mhm.
and they were pretty okay. But I remember having this almost claustrophobic feeling. I had to get out of the house,
Mhm.
and I walked out of my house and I sat down. There's a tree opposite, and I sat looking at them. We'd only been in the house 15 days. Um, literally just moved in, and I remember sat there looking at them. The sun was pretty much coming up by now, and thinking, how did a home become just a house so fucking fast?
Right.
And every single plan I had
Mhm.
is gone, absolutely gone.
Mhm.
Um, and I called Chris because obviously Chris knew my wife. We were already friends. Um, to show you the type of man he was, Chris just said, "I'm on my way." And he got in his car and he drove straight from San Diego. And he was at my house 5 hours later.
Mhm.
And he actually stayed and looked after my dogs while we took Diane home for a funeral. But yeah, it was not being able to save my wife that pushed me over the edge.
Mhm.
And that constant feeling of failure. You second
Right.
guess yourself. Could I have done something else? What didn't I do? Why didn't I find the wound? Blah, blah, blah. But I spoke to the paramedic a couple of days later, and he just said to me, "Mark, with the damage that was done, is she would never have been the Diane you knew again,
Mhm.
because it was probably best. But they said they've never had somebody fight with that sort of traumatic injury. They've never had somebody that was still trying to fight.
Mhm.
So yeah, I was kind of proud of her at that stage. But that's who she was. You
Mhm.
know, she's a phenomenal police officer. She had a sense of humor like you've ever seen, and she wasn't a quitter.
Mhm.
So I wasn't surprised about that. Um, and it gave me hope that she hadn't give up.
Mhm.
I think one of the biggest things that I struggled with was, what if when they put her on the helicopter and she couldn't hear me anymore?
Mhm.
What if she gave up? You know, and I tore myself apart about, what if she thought I didn't care? What if she thought
Mhm.
he doesn't care and she gave up? Now, highly likely that wasn't a part of it at all. But that was where my mind went,
Mhm.
and I tortured myself for years about that, relived it, and there are still things within the first 3 years when me and Chris were running craft. I don't remember saying or doing, you know, and I lost friends for some of the things I said and I did. I to this day have no recollection of it, but
Mhm.
I remember being angry at the world.
Mhm.
I was particularly angry at anybody that was a happy couple, because
Yeah.
money just been stolen off me. Um, yeah, I was just angry all the time. You know, my flash to bang time was 0. Um, and it was, you start to think it's normal. And I also knew I'd started a plan. I decided I was going to follow her. I knew I had to put everything in order first, and it was going to take time. So I decided I'd follow her on the first anniversary. Gave me a year to get everything done,
Mhm.
and I got it done. And me, Chris, and another friend, Stephen, were um, were down at Tilted Kill. That's an interesting reason I was there. I took a business client there once,
Mhm.
and Diane saw it come up on my credit card thing. She lit my ass up for being in the Tilted Kill. So I was driving past it one day after she passed, quite soon after she passed, and I literally put my foot on the brake and turned straight in, and I said out loud, "Fuck you! You left me. I'm going in there." And
Mhm.
I'm pretty much trying to drink myself to death in them every day. I'm English. That clearly didn't work. Um,
Right.
but yeah, we went down there on the anniversary, and I remember watching everybody getting drunk, drinking and having a good time, and everyone else. Chris and Stephen knew it was the anniversary, which is why they took me out anyway. And I was just waiting for them. I was constantly watching my watch,
Mhm.
you know, and at sort of 5 minutes before, I watched where everyone really wasn't paying much attention, and I slipped out the side door. And I went round into the car lot around the back, which was pretty dark, and I just sat on the wall. And I had a 1911 in my hip that I took with me. And I took it out, I put it on the side, and then I just was watching the time.
Mhm.
At about a minute to go, when I heard Stephen's voice say, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm just getting some fresh air." He
Mhm.
goes, "Okay, well, I'll sit and wait with you." I goes, "No, you could get back in." He goes, "No, if you're going to do it, I'm going to sit and wait with you while you do it." And again, the same as my dogs, it broke that
Right.
mentality that I was done.
Mhm.
And he made me think about how he would feel, how everybody else in the bar would feel, the owners would feel with somebody committing suicide in their car. All these thoughts came into my head
Mhm.
and broke that thought that I was going to end it.
Mhm.
And then 1 year, 2 years, 3 years went by, and you know, I wasn't certainly myself for the longest time. You come out of it, you know, and you start to realize that there's a reason you're still here.
Mhm.
You know, I don't necessarily believe in religion, but I do believe in a God or a creator.
Mhm.
And I do believe we're here to experience and learn certain things. If I ended it, I'd probably just failed that course and I'd have to come back and do it again.
Right.
So that sort of sniper's determination crept back in, where I was like, I'm not going to quit.
Mhm.
I'm close a few times to quitting. I haven't quit yet, and
Mhm.
I have no plans to quit, because I think maybe this is Maybe that book, maybe this is one of the reasons I'm still here.
Right.
Maybe my mission now is to stop other people doing it.
Mhm.
As well as I'm always going to train snipers. I'm always going to train people in counter surveillance or covert work because that was a good part of my career and I really enjoyed it.
Mhm.
But I also now have a second challenge, and that is to say to people, it's okay not to be okay, but it isn't okay in your life.
Right.
You affect too many people when you do.
Mhm.
You literally damage millions. Well, millions are kind of exaggeration, I guess, but certainly a large number of people who maybe saw you as some sort of role model.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe you were the best friend they've ever had, and they just never told you.
Mhm.
And you can devastate those people, and not know that you were doing it by not thinking it through.
Right.
And there's always another day. And people say to me, how do you beat it? So you aim for tomorrow.
Mhm.
When you get to tomorrow, aim for tomorrow.
Mhm.
That's what you got to do,
Right.
one step in front of the other, and you'll get there. Isolating yourself, which is a symptom of PTSI, um, is one of the worst things you could do.
Mhm.
Because if you're just locked away in your own head, you just get deeper and deeper into the dark until you end up hurting yourself.
Right.
So yeah, no, it's not a good place to be.
Mhm.
Yeah, my military career wasn't it for me. It was losing my wife and not being able to do anything about it. For Chris, I know it was losing a couple of his guys that he blamed himself for,
Mhm.
and for the things he saw. And there was, a guy in our own unit who was in special forces in the UK, um, just disappeared off into the woods. You know, people panicked about it because his mum started calling friends, and they came from all over the country to try and find him.
Mhm.
Sadly, they found him dead in the middle of the woods 2 days later. But happy-go-lucky guy that you would never have thought was depressed.
Right.
And one of the things I remember from being that depressed was what a great actor I became. You
Yeah.
know, because if people think you're struggling, they'll pay attention to you. And I had a plan to end it. I didn't want anyone getting in the way. So I played a role whenever I was in public. As soon as I shut my front door, I just mentally collapsed.
Mhm.
Um, I upset my daughter at one stage, not for long, because I'd made a public statement on Facebook. I think it was about my dogs saving my lives. My daughter was a police officer in London at the time, or just outside London, and she took a sabbatical to come over and look after me. So she was there, and she was amazing. But she said to me, "Well, what about me?" And I was like, yeah, "Sweetheart, there were times you weren't there,
Mhm.
and the dogs were always there.
Mhm.
And because I was never going to do anything while she was in the house, dogs were always there.
Mhm.
You know, it was the dogs that stopped me. And to this day, I mean, I don't know whether God thinks I'm going to have a bigger problem at some stage, but I've got seven. I've got seven of them now.
Right.
But I'm never getting burgled. Look on the bright side.
Mhm.
So you come in my house, mate. Good luck.
Yeah. There you go. Uh, so I think that it's really important that people understand a lot of those ideas that don't allow yourself to sink into that darkness by yourself.
No,
You know,
and it's hard. It's
you know,
difficult to reach out to somebody. It's
Mhm.
very easy to get sucked in.
Right.
Being deep in your head is not a good place to be.
Mhm.
You've got to talk to people.
Right. It's something that I truly believe. I'm not a religious person either, but I do believe that there's a greater,
Hmm.
and I believe that part of what is intended for us is not to be alone. We are not meant
We're not good at it either.
as at being alone, right? We need to have
Hmm.
companionship, even if it is just dogs. But ideally, you should have a spouse, people that you love. You should have community, whatever it is that helps keep you going. To
Hmm.
allow yourself to like be alone just makes you more susceptible to like sinking into that darkness,
That's why solitary confinement was such a big punishment.
Hmm.
Human beings are not good alone.
Right.
We need interaction with a we're a pack animal the same as a dog is.
Hmm.
I think it's one of the reasons we get on so well with dogs is we just yell and become a pack.
Right.
But no, you're 100% right. If you isolate yourself, you're asking for trouble.
Hmm.
But one of the things I tried to get across in the book was to say to people, look, these are the symptoms. You've got to learn. You've got to become better at seeing it
Hmm.
because they're going to hide them.
Yeah.
They're going to hide these symptoms from you.
Hmm.
You've got to be the one that says, you okay? And not just say, yeah, I'm fine. as an answer.
Right.
Because we always say that. If the average man, if he says he's fine, no, he isn't.
Mhm.
It's just the go-to answer.
Yeah.
Um, and just even if you don't talk to him about it, keep an eye on him. Keep a better eye on him. Get his ass out. Go for a
Right.
pint or whatever. Just don't leave him to stir. 'Cause eventually he will trust you and he will tell you.
Mhm.
Or you'll catch him at the right moment. He has no choice but to talk about it.
Right.
You know, and it's the same for women. It's the same for kids.
Mhm.
You know, I think about these young nurses, etc. That they lose people almost on a daily basis. And
Mhm.
you can't be a nurse and not form a bond with the person you're trying to heal.
Right.
And then to lose them, they must take that amazingly personal.
Mhm.
No, I would.
Yeah.
Who's helping them?
Right.
You know, you don't see them being counted of how many are committing suicide.
Mhm.
You know, doctors, their job, their entire life is to save lives.
Mhm.
How much of a failure must they feel every time they fail?
Right.
There's only so much you can go, there's nothing to do about it. Do they really believe that? I'm not sure they do.
Right.
Um, who's counting their suicides?
Mhm.
You know, I think we've got to become better at it.
Mhm.
And I think the real key is what you said, family. You know, you need to keep an eye on your blood family and your friends,
Mhm.
your family,
Right.
or we're just going to see it increase.
Yeah.
I also don't think it helps to pander um, to certain groups at the moment. I mean, if somebody's telling me he's a dog, I'm like, no, I'm
Right.
sorry, mate, you need fucking help,
Yeah.
and it's not pedigree jump. So we've got to come back to your point earlier. We can't fix everything,
Mhm.
but we do have to recognise sometimes. You go, it's not his right to think he's a dog. It's a mental disorder.
Right.
How about we help him?
Mhm.
And trying to tell kids one thing or another before they even know what it is.
Mhm.
No,
Right.
yeah, non-binary. What the fuck is that? Um, Man, woman. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
If a man dresses up as a woman, that's great. Enjoy your life. I don't have a problem with it.
Right.
But don't expect me to call you certain things because that's not going to happen.
Right.
I'll respect you and I'll respect your wishes and you have a fantastic life, mate. As
Mhm.
long as you're happy.
Right.
But don't expect the rest of the world to play that game.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not going to happen. Where's my rights? They go, well, it's my rights if you don't call me a plural. I'm a they. No, you're not. You're singular. Um, what about my rights is to say that's grammatically incorrect?
Right.
So I don't think we're doing these people too many favors. And
Mhm.
you now see too many, even if you look at the sort of people that did change, physically change sex,
Mhm.
an awful lot of them regret it.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, if I just waited a little bit longer, a bit late now.
Mhm.
And I always tease people. There was a Hans Christian Andersen story, a very famous story called The Emperor's New Clothes.
Mhm.
And it was basically about a con man who convinced the emperor that he made him a magic suit, but only him and the cool people could see it. And they all go on about the emperor's new clothes. Well, he's walking around stark naked,
Mhm.
obviously in the story. And it's not till a little child says, "Why is the king or why is the emperor naked?" That everyone kind of wakes up and laughs, and the king comes to his senses.
Mhm.
Well, it's kind of like that now.
Yeah.
Like people say one thing, and everyone goes, "Yeah, I totally agree. I can see it." But the vast majority go, "What are you on about?"
Right.
No.
Mhm.
And it comes back to the fact that human beings, well, I always say we haven't earned the title mankind. We're certainly not kind.
Right.
Um, and I don't think we're really going to change. I think it's in our DNA. There is a side to us that is violent.
Mhm.
And I think to me, I question whether that's God's way of keeping our population down because everything on the planet has a predator except us.
Mhm. We're it.
We're it.
Yeah.
We're the predator of us.
Mhm.
And that's why I think every now and again we end up having a massive war and culling our own numbers.
Mhm.
Maybe for the planet it's good,
Mhm.
but I don't think we're going to change. People
Yeah.
say to me, "Oh, I panic about America going to war now because of the kids today." I disagree.
Mhm.
I've seen some of these young kids last week, etc., in the military, and they're as tough a soldiers I ever was. And there's plenty of them out there on the streets that are just as tough.
Right.
because of the media, we pander to a tiny percentage of what's actually happening in the world,
Mhm. Right.
rather than focusing on the majority.
Mhm.
And I've had arguments with people where they go about it's my human right. No such thing.
Mhm.
You you only have a right because the majority in your country agree with you.
Yeah.
You piss the majority off, watch how quick those rights disappear.
Mhm.
Or go try it in China. Go try it in Saudi Arabia. Go try it in Iran. See how your human rights argument stands up.
Right.
It's like, and the naivety of them, you know, the way they're going on with sort of queers for Hamas and all the rest of it. Do you know anything about Hamas? And they throw you off a roof.
Right.
And you go, you can't go over there and go, no, we're all together. Yeah, you're all together going off the roof is what you're doing.
Right.
And it's a lack of education, and
Mhm.
it's a lack of parenting in a lot of ways.
Right.
Because when your kid goes, "Oh, I think I'm a girl," and you go, "No, you're not. You're a boy."
Right.
And that's it. If you pander that, well, you might be a girl.
Yeah.
You're as bad.
Yeah.
We can drive a car as long as we pass a test,
Mhm.
but we can have a kids without passing any tests.
Right.
Seem right somehow.
Yeah.
But hey, just gonna watch the world go by and just see how it comes out of it.
There you go.
There'll be another war. And all of this woke stuff's gone out the window because all these people that go, well, I wouldn't go to war. Well, then you're going to go to jail.
Right.
And all these people that turn up and start disobeying military commands in training are going to get punched. There's going to
Mhm.
war now. So all that crap's out the window.
Well, so in the instance where we find ourselves now, we've allowed I don't know how many millions of illegals to come into this country, right?
So like they were talking about 30 to 100,000 a month.
Yeah. So think about it in these terms. The vast majority, probably 95% or more of those are military age males.
Hmm.
Okay. The last calculation that I heard was that if you assume that all of those were military age males and intending to do us harm, there are 6 times the number of enemy soldiers in our country now as our own military.
Hmm. The
That
problem being is,
Mhm.
when you speak to the guys on the border, they have a phrase OTM
Mhm.
other than Mexican. Okay. And the majority of people coming across,
Right.
they'll stop. They recently stopped, truckloads of military age guys who all claimed to be Mexican. And then once they were asked questions a little bit deeper, all turned out to be Iranian.
Mhm.
You know, Hezbollah, not so, Hamas is more localized again in Gaza, etc. But Hezbollah would be Iran's equivalent of Blackwater.
Mhm.
They're a deniable asset. Iran's not stupid enough to get in an all-out fight with America.
Right.
Couldn't win. But if they've got a deniable asset, and there are literally thousands of them in this country now, they've been
Mhm.
coming across for over a decade. Guarantee there are little cells that are just waiting. That if we end up in a war with them, you'll see everything from hospitals to get attacked to shopping malls to schools, because their attitude is to break American morale as quick as they can, or they're going to lose. You're now seeing a massive increase in Chinese military-aged men.
Mhm.
Everyone knows it can't win a war against America,
Right.
but if they've got special forces teams all over this country, they can take a lot of our infrastructure out,
Right.
weaken us very quick.
So this goes back to the thing you were talking about with, shooting at a ship.
Hmm.
One person can do a significant amount of damage that doesn't seem obvious, right? That same principle applies to those
Absolutely
soldiers.
does. You can guarantee they know our grid system,
Mhm.
and which ones to take out and do the most damage in the country.
Yeah.
They know where all the leaders live. I mean, and certainly if you look back to what we did covertly against the IRA, we knew who their commanders were. We knew who the quartermasters were. We knew who the guys who pulled triggers were. And they were just under surveillance until they presented the opportunity to have them arrested. Because they rarely, would get into a fair gunfight.
Mhm.
But we knew who they were. And we'd have to be pretty naive to think that China, Russia, and the Iranians, etc., are not doing the same to us.
Right.
Now, if you look at the tunnel systems for the cartels, and then you look at tunnel systems in Gaza,
Mhm.
it's almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
And you remember the movie, um,
Scario.
something Valor? It was about the Navy SEALs. Basically, it was the guy laid on the grenade at the end of the movie, which was based on an incident that Chris was involved in. Something. It'll come back to me. But basically, it was SEAL teams tracking terrorists all over the world that
Hmm.
ended up on the Mexican border,
Hmm.
being assisted by the cartels to get into America to make attacks. And they point out the movie's based on fact.
Right.
And there is so much evidence that the cartels are taking weapons, training, and equipment for getting Hezbollah into the country.
Hmm.
If you think there's not stockpiles of RPG-7s, BKM machine guns, and everything else all over this country, you're kidding yourself.
Right.
You know, you've only got to look at South Phoenix, where some of these young cartel members are getting caught with HE grenades in their car, you know, or they've got automatic weapons. Police don't.
Right.
You know, you turn up in a fight with some of the cartels, you're going
Hmm.
to get grenades thrown at you. They've got automatic weapons, you haven't.
Hmm.
So we're already at a massive disadvantage because they're playing our laws against us, which is exactly what the IRA did. And they were very good at it because we stick to our own laws
Hmm.
most of the time.
Most of the time.
But the only good thing about the US compared to the UK, because the same things happen in the UK. There's a
Hmm.
lot of just fighting age men turning up, refugees, no women, no children, um, all being allowed into the country. The difference in America is they're going to get a fight on every street corner
Hmm.
because everyone's carrying.
Right.
In the UK, they're going to turn up with weapons, and there ain't nothing the UK can do
Hmm.
except wait for the army to turn up.
Hmm.
Um, but here, the average citizen is smart enough to know that an armed society is a polite society,
Right.
and there are a lot of people. I run training. There's a lot of people clamoring for more training now
Hmm.
because they can see something coming.
Right.
And for us down here on the border, I've heard people on my travels across the country say, is it really that bad at the border? Yeah, yeah, it is. Go down to the border and have a look. Speak to some of the ranchers who have got the property near the border that are constantly overrun.
Hmm.
Um, Speak to some of the sort of women that get in here that have all been raped on the way here.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's bad, and they're all armed. They're all now becoming standardized in their arms, whereas before cartels would have a mixed match of weapons.
Hmm.
Now you see they're all carrying the same pistol. They're all carrying the same assault rifle. Someone's training them,
Right.
and it's probably the Iranians. Could be the Chinese, but I think it's a bit obvious for them.
Hmm.
But certainly Hezbollah would do it. They don't have too many scruples.
Right.
So yeah, it's going to get worse.
Hmm.
And I've been watching, obviously, with us being involved in shooting down sort of Houthi missiles and everything else,
Hmm.
and we assisted in shooting stuff down that was aimed at Israel.
Hmm.
It's only a matter of time before the Iranians do something here.
Right.
I know you Hezbollah because then they can go, wasn't us.
Right.
We didn't tell them to do that. So we'll see.
Yeah. It's a frightening time. I've talked to Dan, the owner of Packed Up here, and we've talked about this before, that there was a point in history prior to like every major war, right,
Hmm.
where you saw all of the events that were leading up to that instance, right? That's the time that we're living in right now, whether
It's
people
absolutely the
recognize
time.
that or not.
No, it
It's
most
like,
definitely is.
you know,
The whole phony war thing from World War II, where people were saying Hitler wouldn't invade and he wouldn't do this and he wouldn't do that,
mhm,
and we sat and watched him build up his
right,
arms.
hmm,
Um, we're watching it now.
yeah,
Yeah, we're watching the Chinese catch up and surpass us in some areas.
right,
Uh, we're watching the Russians basically get their ass handed to them. So they're not necessarily such a threat, but they're a nuclear power, so
right,
they're always a threat.
hmm,
The Iranians clearly have an awful lot of ballistic missiles, not the best in the world. They
hmm,
can clearly be shot down. There's a lot of them. I think they fired over 600 missiles at Israel, both missiles and drones.
hmm,
The Houthis, who are firing Iranian equipment, constantly attacking shipping now.
hmm,
Um, yeah, we're one spark away from a major war
right.
because sooner or later one of those three superpowers is going to clash.
Well, and the thing that wraps me around the axle the most is that our own administration, the current administration, seems not only uninterested in trying to protect our country, but almost complicit in making sure that we fail.
That makes me wonder. I'm not a great conspiracy theorist, but you have to question why it is they're making so many decisions that benefit
Hmm.
our potential enemies.
Right.
Allowing the sanctions to run out just before the Iranians started launching missiles to give them $1 billion back.
Hmm.
Wonder where that got spent.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. And as much as people, you know, complained about Trump, nobody messed with America while Trump was a president,
Right.
because he was Churchill over here.
Right.
He clearly had the balls to
Hmm.
say, if you want to fight, you can have it.
Hmm.
North Korea was quiet. Chinese were quiet. After all the noise the Chinese were making about if you put sanctions on us and blah blah blah, they didn't do anything
Hmm.
because they knew he would.
Right.
Um, to be honest, I think he's probably the only option we've got right now
Hmm.
to put this country back on its feet.
Right.
Um, it's a safer world when people are frightened of the United States.
Hmm.
Whether you like it or not, you are the world's police because you are the only people with the power to do it.
Hmm.
We just seem to be being destroyed from the inside out.
Hmm.
They cancel all the oil, etc., which made us now dependent on somebody else again.
Hmm.
They're shutting down American manufacturing capabilities again, like Obama did. Trump put them all back in, and they
Right.
said to him, "Oh, you have to be a magician to reopen everything." Well, I guess he is because he did it.
Right.
And I've never seen a single man be sort of hunted so much in American history. They're
Right.
trying everything to put the man in jail, and that just says they're frightened of him.
Hmm.
Um, is he a politician? Absolutely not. Is he a statesman? Absolutely
No.
not. But he might be what America needs right now.
Right.
Because, I mean, you remember when he just walked across the border in North Korea? Kim Il Jong was on the other side, and most people stand there, look at each other with binoculars, and he walked straight across. They could have opened fire on him. It would have started a war, but they could have done.
Right.
What happened? Kim Il Jong comes forward because he's just like, okay, you've just publicly challenged me. He
Right.
comes forward. They shake hands. They talk.
Uh-huh.
No more problems from North Korea all the time Trump was in power.
Yeah.
As soon as he's not in power, they're firing missiles and kicking off again.
Hmm.
So, when Roosevelt said, tread gently but carry a big stick,
Right.
100% right.
Hmm.
The only difference is Trump didn't know how to walk quietly. Everything he did was loud.
Right.
But you can't knock the man's patriotism.
Right.
He's the only president that lost money being a president.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'd like to know how Kamala Harris went from like 3 million, in her bank to 16 million now.
Yeah.
How does that happen? You definitely haven't been paid enough for that to happen. So you're getting money from somewhere.
Right.
Um, I'm sorry, but it's time these people were looked into.
Hmm. Pastime.
Just there's an awful lot of people making a lot of money on positions in the American government
Right.
on both sides. I don't
Mhm.
think it's one side.
Well, $61 billion going to Ukraine. That should be raising a lot of questions for people. It's like, where is that money
Well,
going?
I don't know if it's true or not, but a lot of people are saying, well, a lot of that money's coming back to
Hmm.
politicians for backing it.
Yeah.
And you got to say that's a possibility when you look at how much their own personal profit has gone up.
Hmm.
You go, okay, well, explain to me how you've got 16 million.
Right.
You're an elected official of the United States government. You're not supposed to be making money on that,
Right.
apart from a very generous wage that you're paid. Um, Audit them. I want to see where that money came from. They
Hmm.
were quick enough to audit Trump and all
Right.
his taxes and what everything else. I want to see yours,
Right.
because I've lost faith in this administration.
Hmm.
I mean, the man can't even put a sentence together. It's an embarrassment. And if he's not mentally competent to be prosecuted for having secret documents in his garage,
Hmm.
then surely he shouldn't be president.
Absolutely.
Surely he shouldn't be the man with the nuclear football.
Hmm.
But I just can't understand how it's not being addressed.
Hmm.
So we'll see come election day.
There we go.
If they haven't started a war by then.
Yeah. That's,
One way to stop the election,
I,
start a war.
yeah. I just recently saw the movie A Civil War. I don't know if you've seen that or not.
I'm not. Is it worth watching?
No, not really.
Is it
The
depressing?
Well, the point of the story is that they very specifically don't tell you anything really about the Civil War itself. The story is actually about war journalists like that are embedded that are trying to like get to the president to try to have some sort of interview with him. and it's about their lives as embedded journalists and war torn and whatever. Um, and they have incidents, as they're trying to make their way across the country. They run into different people in different situations that they have to deal with. So that's largely what the movie is about. The only details that they give you, and I'm sorry, I'm going to spoil this for everybody who hasn't seen the movie yet, is that the president is in his third term, that he opened fire and bombed American citizens, and that sparked whatever the Civil War is. Okay, and then you have like a Western Front that is slowly making its way to try to retake the country. Um, and that's it. Everything else is about these journalists and about their situation and what's going on, right?
Mm.
So it tells you so little about that it's that's why people are going to see the movie. At least that's the why I went to go see the movie, is I wanted to
Yeah.
see
See what?
kind of like how this would kind of play out and what sort of, events would have to happen to get us to that point in the first place,
Mm.
right? Um, but the concept is that if we get to that point, it's not going to go well. I mean, there's no way that, just like you said, it's one small spark away from everything exploding in this country.
I have to. I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of American soldiers, special forces guys, etc. Very honourable men,
Hmm.
and I have to put my trust in the fact that they wouldn't allow an administration to go too far. Like my biggest fear is if they suddenly stop the election, if they steal the election, is going to be a big issue.
Right,
Um, I just have to put my faith in the U.S. military that will say no, you are not messing with our country,
right,
and clear out Congress, start again.
right.
A lot of them have been in there way too long.
Very, yeah. Not only that, they need to impose term limits
Hmm.
moving forward.
I do.
There
I
should
mean, I
be.
understand them saying that there is a certain amount of years you need to put in there to become experienced
Hmm.
as a politician. I
Hmm.
get that. Um, there has to be a cap on that.
Right,
Otherwise you get these people sat there just for years. And I think there's a lot of good people go into Congress, but I think once they get there, they find out you either play the game or we're just going to get you voted out in the next term.
right.
And you have a choice at that stage.
Hmm.
Become rich or lose your job.
Yeah,
Simple as that. But yeah, there's something clearly wrong
hmm,
in politics right now.
yeah,
Probably too much influence from corporate. You only got to look at some of the donators and donors for most of these pies. They're not giving you that money for no reason.
right.
You owe them.
Hmm.
I think some corporations are too powerful now.
BlackRock.
Hmm.
Yeah,
It's scary when you look at how many fingers in pies they've got and how much of it they
they
own.
own almost everything in our
Hmm.
country, which it's ridiculous.
I mean, you look at families. Rockefeller springs to mind, but there are plenty of them. They've been funding both sides of wars for years,
Hmm.
just getting richer and richer off of it.
Right.
And they got more money than some countries.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're powerful people.
Hmm.
Soros, I'm starting to think is an alien. I can't believe he's not dead yet. Um, but
Yeah.
what a evil, twisted man he appears to be.
Hmm.
I've met him, so I can't say for sure, but it doesn't look good from what's coming out.
Right.
Um, and his history from World War II onwards is not particularly shiny.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's some very powerful, dangerous people. Another place that probably needs to be gutted is Hollywood.
Right.
I think these people have forgotten they make their entire living on pretending to be real people.
Yes.
You go listen, you read a script, you pretend to be somebody else.
Hmm.
And that's all you do.
Right.
You're just dancing monkey. To be quite honest, you're an entertainment. These people now giving us how we should run the country. You're based on what?
Yeah.
Most of you are so out of touch with reality. It's ridiculous.
Right.
And to be honest, the British comedian Ricky Gervais, when he tore him up at the thing, I mean, he summed it up when he said, "Don't come up here and tell people how to run life. You have no idea.
Right.
You live in all these big mansions. You have no comprehension of what it's really like."
Hmm.
It was funny when he said most of you spent less time in school than Greta Thunberg, but is
Right.
and he echoed what most of the world was thinking.
Hmm.
He just had the balls to say
Right.
it. But I do like watching that.
Mhm.
You can only hope. This country's been I mean, I'm as proud an Englishman as you'll ever find, but I'm very proud of being American as well.
Right.
I came to this country because I love the way of life. You guys don't settle for shoddy service. You know, you're quite happy to pay for it, but you expect value for money. And I like that. And most Americans are some of the nicest people I've met.
Right.
Yeah, they'll stop and talk to you in the street just because I have a dodgy accent.
Hmm.
Um, but it's I had people lend me their car keys when I was attached to the U.S. Marines. They never met me. They knew I was staying there for the weekend. Hey, that's my truck. Help yourself.
Right.
Good people.
Hmm.
Now, not everybody, but I can go to any country in the world and find not everybody.
Right.
Um, and when I first moved here, it was borderline annoying that as soon as I opened my mouth, everybody wanted to talk to me.
Hmm.
Um, Now it's a compliment. You can't help but see it as a compliment,
Right.
and it's just people are much friendlier.
Hmm.
And I don't think the rest of the world really knows what real Americans are.
Hmm.
You know, and I have this argument with people in England when I go home sometimes where they'll, and it's, oh, fucking Yanks. And you go, okay, well, two, don't call a Southerner that because you're going to get punched. You, two, have you ever been to America? Well, I've been to Disneyland. Hardly America, mate.
Yeah. Right.
Go out and meet real Americans. They're good. They're good people.
Hmm.
They got to be. They keep giving you all their tax money to try and save your country.
Hmm.
Yet when Hurricane Katrina went on, I bet not a single country sent a blanket or a towel. Nothing.
Hmm.
So I'd say Americans are pretty good people because they take their tax dollars and give it to other countries, a lot of which you just call American names.
Right.
So I'd say they're pretty good people.
Hmm.
And just like it's difficult sometimes to realize that the media are owned by three different people, you
Right.
know, and they're all working to one political party,
Hmm.
and they will put on TV exactly what they want you to hear.
Hmm.
Sadly, there's a lot of sheep in this country, like there is everywhere else, and they just believe whatever they hear
Right.
instead of doing some research. And the joke came out was, you know, what's the difference between um, conspiracy theory and the truth?
Right.
About 6 months normally.
Yeah.
Um, and then you see these people, everything conspiracy, and then it comes out.
Yeah.
And then you do a bit of research and go, conspiracy theory was started by the CIA after JFK's assassination.
Right.
So it's a political phrase, it's a political tool.
Hmm.
Wake up. You know,
Hmm.
there's a lot of people just don't pay attention.
Right.
And you're like, there's a reason all of a sudden all these UFOs are being talked about. It's either because they're real and we know they're coming,
Hmm.
or we want you to think they're real, but they're actually ours.
Right.
So you just got to look a bit deeper.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's an interesting world.
Yes, it is. Well, I definitely want to be respectful of your time. I'm really happy that you could be here.
No, it's a pleasure.
You know,
Thank you for inviting me
yeah,
on. I really enjoyed it.
yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to reading, finish the Outdance the Devil, but also
Yeah.
to like go back and read some of the prior books most
Just
definitely.
remember, there's a whole book of sort of my mistakes. So, right, don't judge me afterwards.
That's right.
Try and help people. But it was difficult to go. Yeah, I was an idiot there and there, again there.
Right. But just on that point right there, I think that's something that people need to recognize. Again, none of it's perfect. We make mistakes.
Hmm.
We live our life. We have our flaws and do the best we can in most cases, right? It's all that we can do.
Hmm.
As long as you're always striving to be better and to do better next time, or to help somebody else not make the same mistakes that you did, you're doing pretty well.
I think forgiveness is probably the biggest gift we've got.
Yeah.
Um, Mainly for us. I
Yeah.
mean, there are people that have wronged me quite badly, and I could have got bitter and twisted about it. But I decided just to forgive them. I'm a great believer in karma.
Mhm.
Um, why would I want to spend my life hating somebody that doesn't know I'm hating them?
Right.
It's ruining my day, not theirs.
Hmm.
Um, but I think forgiveness is a big gift.
Hmm.
But I think it does us more good than it does the person you're forgiving.
Right.
Otherwise, you hold on to it for way too long.
There you go. Well, once again, thank you very much.
My pleasure, sir.
And it was an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
You too. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, you can now support the Non-Victim Nation by donating via listener support directly on Spotify. Remember, the story of your life is being written right now, and you are the hero.